This video is brought to you by NordVPN. Labour and the Conservatives are the two largest parties in the UK. Nominally, they're meant to provide voters a choice between two different ideologies and two different ways of running the country in each election they contest. However, the leaders of both parties, Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak respectively, have presented themselves to the public as broadly economically centrist, soft-right social technocrats who intend to run the country in a less abrasive manner to that of Johnson or Truss. For many, there's simply very little difference between the two leaders, leading to frustration over the lack of choice between ideologies at the next general election. So in this video, we're going to have a look at whether this characterisation is fair by looking at a little bit of history about the differences between the two parties, the current differences between the parties, and whether they could become ideologically distinct in the run-up to the next general election. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Let's start with a bit of history. Labour's first majority government was formed right after the Second World War, with the country wanting to see an expanded welfare state. This is something that the Attlee government implemented when they got into office through the creation of the NHS. While some Tories rejected this initially, the Tories soon agreed in the Industrial Charter of 1947 that they would not reverse the changes. The two main parties then agreed on the nationalisation of some key industries. A few decades ago, this would have been a major point of difference. This was one of the first and largest signs of the budding new post-war consensus. Satirists at the time made light of this by inventing the term Butskillism, an amalgam of the surnames of Labour's Chancellor Hugh Gaitskell and the Tory Chancellor Ram Butler. This consensus held for the following few decades, with prime ministers from both parties agreeing on broad aspects of social policy, economic policy, education reform, the premise of a mixed economy, and the principle of full employment. By the late 1970s, though, the cracks were beginning to show, as neither party could get control of inflation and unemployment. Elected in 1979, Margaret Thatcher smashed the post-war consensus and allowed unemployment to rise in her early years in order to get in control of inflation. Her opposite number in the Labour Party, Michael Foot, was very left-wing, and there was, once more, ideological distinctiveness between the two main parties. Following successive defeats, though, the Labour Party began dragging itself back to the middle ground until, in 1997, Tony Blair won a landslide victory. Labour were criticised for being Tory-light, with them accepting a lot of the changes made in the previous administration, notably the privatisation of many key industries. For the new Labour period, the ideological distinctiveness was, again, narrowed. Now, the point we're making here is that throughout the post-war period, the two main parties fluctuate in their respective ideologies. Sometimes a leader comes forward that puts an effort into differentiating themselves from their opponent. And sometimes this leader is successful, like Thatcher differentiating herself from her predecessor Ted Heath and opponent James Callaghan. Others are just not as lucky. So, now that we've established that there are periods where the parties are more similar and other periods where they're more distinct, let's move on and have a look exactly where the two main parties are right now, starting with the leaders themselves. Both Starmer and Sunak appear to want to set themselves apart from the, well, less than serious former prime ministers. Liz Truss was seen as not credible on the economy, and Boris Johnson was seen as a liability in office. Sunak has tried to demonstrate that he's a clean break from this, a more professional leader who's simply focused on getting the job done and maintaining party unity. Similarly, Starmer's keen to use his background as a lawyer to be more analytical in his scrutiny of government. Both men are keen on trying to minimise controversy. On the policy front, both leaders share a similar moderate outlook. Their focus is clearly the economy. Both leaders' first of their 5 priorities are to do with the economy. For Starmer, this is securing the highest sustained growth in the G7. For Sunak, this is halving inflation. Starmer and Sunak are also keen to show that they can make difficult decisions on the economy. As such, Sunak made clear that unlike his predecessor Liz Truss, he would not be cutting taxes early in his premiership. Similarly, Starmer recently promised not to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Some, such as the Future of Britain conference, describe this as really ruthless. Clearly, this was an attempt by the Labour leader to show that he too can make tough economic decisions. Traditionally, Labour is the party that's much more comfortable engaging in welfare spending. The fact that they're not doing this and instead are making clear to the public that they'll maintain this form of cap on welfare demonstrates their economic convergence with the Tories. Moreover, neither party regularly discusses nationalising any additional key industries, such as water or rail, demonstrating that both main parties are committed to the idea of the mixed economy. In a totally different policy area, both parties have demonstrated that they have relatively right-wing attitudes towards some key social issues too. Starmer's made a point of not wading into the culture war, with him refusing to describe what a woman is. Previously, Labour governments have been progressive on social issues, with the Wilson government decriminalising homosexuality, abortion and scrapping the death penalty, all in one term. Sure, Sunak goes further on these topics, regularly stoking the culture war and making clear his more socially right-wing credentials. But this gap has certainly been narrowed by Starmer's failure to engage with prescient social issues. And even on one of the big dividing issues of the last decade, Brexit, both main leaders now seem to share the same view that the referendum should be respected and we need to make it work. Starmer may well have voted and campaigned for Remain, but he's made clear that he doesn't think that the UK should try and rejoin yet. So, all in all, it's understandable why people think that the Tories and Labour have converged under the leadership of Sunak and Starmer. However, as we demonstrated, this isn't all that uncommon and has happened on numerous occasions throughout post-war history. It's also worth noting that while this may appear to be the case right now, we are still a little way off yet from the general election. As such, no manifesto's been agreed upon or published. It's in this manifesto that we'd expect to see their radical policies. So yes, Labour and the Tories may seem similar right now, but this may not be the case in the run-up to the next general election. Following stories and doing independent journalism often requires a fair bit of travel, from attending the NATO summit in Lithuania or Munich Security Conference to exploring Aldi across Germany or being forced to hang out with fellow Nebula creators. It's all right for some people. What is consistently annoying though is the technology. When you need to work from abroad or even just access the services you're used to, it's often way harder than you'd like, requiring endless verification, validation and authentications. As I'm sure you already know, that's when NordVPN comes into play, helping you connect to the internet wherever you are. Whether that's connecting back at home so your work account doesn't freak out, or connecting to another country from the comfort of your living room to get discounts on your next trip. That's right, very often other countries get cheaper prices for flights, with research finding US consumers pay up to 3 times more. NordVPN are actually currently running a major back-to-school promotion, which means that when you sign up for a 2-year plan, you not only get a massive discount, but you also get an extra 4 months. That's a huge discount if you click our link. Plus, Nord will keep sponsoring TLDR if people click it. We've been told that sometimes when people hear us talk about NordVPN, they open up a tab, start searching, but they don't click our link. I'm certainly glad that they get the service, but you only get the discount and you only support the channel through that link. So if you're trying to improve our journalism by signing up for Nord, use our link when you do, and you'll get their great service at a discount.